Our employees have got their rights, which we as employers have no authority to abrogate, and we respect them. So we cannot discuss them in public because they too, they know the procedures on internal administration.
Justice Florence Mmembe, this pretty, cool, calm and collected, soft-spoken lady, resigned her position as Electoral Commission of Zambia ECZ chairperson following a protracted standoff with some workers at the electoral body after she dismissed Dan Kalale as director. Justice Mmembe's appointment, it must be mentioned, was overwhelmingly ratified by Parliament, whose numerical figures weighed more on the ruling Movement for Multi-Party Democracy MMD. Hello, Chanda Chimba III here. Welcome to Stand Up For Zambia. In this edition, I'll talk a little bit about the Electoral Commission of Zambia ECZ saga, but I shall also fill you in on some issues regarding Fred Mmembe, King Cobra Sata, as well as a few other people and organizations who are forever critical of governments. It can only be imagined that Mmembe resigned not only to show her inner strength, but also to pave way for investigations leveled against her by Kalale over the single sourcing of KPMG engaged to do some auditing. Shortly after his dismissal, Kalale rushed to hold a press conference, making several specific allegations. This immediately prompted a work stoppage by some workers at the electoral body. The whole problem sounds more administrative than anything, but if there is really something to investigate regarding the counter-accusations of corruption and wrongdoing, the relevant arms of government will no doubt get to the bottom of it. This also brings me to the issue of the goings-on at the Lusaka City Council, LCC, the country's flagship local authority. May the Minister of Local Government and Housing really get to the very bottom of the land scam involving councillors who include people like Patriotic Front, Kabwata Member of Parliament Given Lubinda. Lubinda is resisting several calls for him to step down as chapter president of the African Parliamentarians Network Against Corruption, APNAC, on what are being referred to as moral grounds. So far, Lubinda has shown thick skin, yet he is on record calling for people being investigated for corruption and other vices to step aside or resign on what he always refers to as moral grounds. Well, it is his turn now, and he must practice what he preaches. The allegations over land at the LCC border on corruption, the same vice his APNAC stands to fight against, yet he is finding it very difficult to step aside. But for his allies like Ruben Lifuka's and Goodwill Lungu's Transparency International Zambia, their reaction to the alleged land scam in Zambia's capital is to unveil a similar scam at the Kafue District Council and challenge the Minister of Local Government and Housing to act in the same manner he did over the LCC. Now the question is, why were Lifuka and Lungu holding on to information so important to the cause they claim to be pursuing until the minister suspended the Lusaka City Council? Is it because their ally Lubinda is caught up in this scam? I'm sure you remember how not too long ago they demanded for Dora Silia to resign her portfolio as Transport and Communications Minister. Now here's to you, presenting Fred Mmembe, the almighty editor of the cheeky and otherwise anti-government Post newspaper. This is an ambitious, cunning person, believed to have been born out of wedlock. It is clear the almighty Mmembe has an identity crisis. Co-starring in the drama series yet to be given a title, King Cobra Michael Sata, Patriotic Front President. The Cobra is a ferocious, power-thirsty troublemaker, potential terrorist and warlord, and he seems to have an aggressive approach to everything. You see, this illicit and evil union between these two people leaves more questions than answers. Now I want to draw your attention to some black and white, rather unusual, out-of-this-world characters that have been appearing in almost every edition of Mmembe's post for quite some time. Coming in all shapes and sizes, these characters look like they are part of an advertisement when they are actually standalone symbols of some sort. Yes, I'm sure you have seen this black and white star-like thing, or a black strip stretching into a shadowy white in almost every edition of this newspaper that you have read over the last few years. These symbols, or whatever they are, were first shown to me by a colleague. Honestly speaking, I had seen these several times before, but they sure did look like part of adverts. I have consulted widely, and I'm now given to understand that these have connections to the occult. In short, I have been told that these are satanic symbols. So Mmembe's post must explain why they deceive readers by making it appear as if these are part of adverts. One person who associated with this newspaper and appears to know a little more than you and I is James Lukuku, a young politician who was terribly manipulated, misled and misguided by Mmembe's post, a situation that can only be described as a vicious attempt to brainwash him.
I can tell you that the post is more of an occult. It is an occult, and most of the stuff they do is occultism. You are going to find that most of the people that read this paper, they hate government. They hate government officials. They hate the president. So where does that hatred come from? It comes from the fact that this paper has got an attachment to it with occultism. And on that issue, I have to leave it like that.
No. I think explain a little bit more. Occultism is, explain a little bit more, some intricate issues there. Just a little bit more.
Yeah, but you see what it is. I should believe that we are supposed to have the limits of interest. What I ask Zambians is to ask themselves, why is it that when they read the Post newspaper and they start believing in the Post publication, it is all about hate, it is all about division? Why is it like that? Because this is a Christian nation. Frederick Chiruba is hated because he has declared this nation a Christian nation. The Post newspaper transcends homosexuality. Transcends homosexuality. But these people have got kids and they have got wives. But if they are going to ask me to say that I should give them the facts about the fact that they transcend homosexuality, I'm ready to do that.
Please, just add a little bit more detail regarding gayism, homosexuality, what you're claiming the Post transcends.
Yeah, they do transcend those issues, my brother. And I know that even you, this is not gonna be the end of it.
No, but I don't have inside information.
Yes,
I've never interacted with.
All what I want, I don't want this issue to go to an extent where these people are going to think like I'm there to scandalize them. I'm not there to scandalize them, and I'm there just to tell the truth. And this is why I'm telling you that the Post transcends homosexuality.
Yes, for a long time now, there has been talk to the effect that one or two of our brothers at Mmembe's Post are involved in abominable unnatural practices, which in simple language is referred to as gayism or homosexuality. There are names to this effect, but at this stage, these will be withheld, a rather frustrating decision. But the Zambian government's position on the issue of homosexuality has been made very clear, and Rupia Banda's administration knows it is a complex issue.
Up to now, I cannot understand how anybody should tolerate a homosexual, for instance. But listening to how complex it is, just in your mind, you're trying to make sense of it, and you've devoted all your life to this. You can imagine how difficult it is for me when it comes to the laws, whether or not to permit homosexuality in our society. And what is worse is that in our cooperating partners who are much more influential than us because of their money, their influence. They actually, many of them have come to glorify it. Yes. Talking to our young people and making them believe that homosexuality is a human right, and that if you appear to speak against it, then you are a reactionary and you don't understand the world, etc., etc.
I want you to go and pose this question. Can you go and investigate, because you are very investigative, find out if there is no sacrist at the Post newspaper? But why should the media institution have a sacrist? They've got a sacrist there, and I'm going to be there, and if they argue, I'm going to prove to you that there is a sacrist at the Post newspaper. What? So why should an institution, which is a media institution, which is a publishing institution, have a sacrist? Every Catholic knows what a sacrist is. Sacred instruments are kept in the sacrist. So that is what is a sacrist. So go and investigate if there is no sacrist at the Post newspaper.
And you've seen this with your own eyes?
That is the fact, yes. That is the fact. I know, and I'm able to prove that there's a sacrist at the Post newspaper.
These revelations by Lukuku probably have your eyeballs coming out of the sockets. But for a person who Mmembe's post pretty much made one of their own and wanted to use to malign and discredit Rupiah's administration, what he has brought to the fore should not be dismissed outrightly. There must be some grain of truth, and Mmembe's post surely has a great deal of explaining to do. This may in fact just be a tip of the iceberg, because the larger portion of the iceberg is still submerged. Now, in case you did not know, the idea of this newspaper, which started off as the Weekly Post, was conceived by Mike Hall and Melinda Ham, both journalists of European descent, who teamed up with John Mukela and Robbie Mackay, as well as Masao Sopiri, all big names in newspaper journalism in 1991. These, if you like, may be termed the founding editors of the present-day Post newspaper. However, some Zambian businessmen like Arthur Wiener, Bodo Nkumbula, Theo Bu, Ino Kavindele, and Anderson Mazoka each contributed 400,000 kwacha as investment to establish the newspaper, effectively becoming shareholders. There are many theories pointing to how Mmembe found himself at this newspaper, but only one seems probable: the fact that he found his way into the paper by virtue of being a nephew to Arthur Wiener, one of the initial shareholders, under whose roof he was brought up. Well, information I have gathered suggests that Arthur Wiener appointed his nephew, Mmembe, to represent him at the newspaper's shareholders' meetings. With this, Mmembe appeared to have seen an opportunity to get to the top of a very promising and vibrant young publication. When the MMD came into being in 1990 as a pressure group, Arthur Wiener became its interim leader. His influence made Mmembe become part of the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy MMD Mobilization Committee, which also included Frederick Chiluba, a trade union leader at the time, later to become the MMD's first elected president and Zambia's second president. During the period leading up to the first MMD convention in February 1991 at Mulungushi International Conference Center, Mmembe was always seen around, mostly carrying a bag or briefcase for Arthur Wiener, in effect kind of taking the role of a special aide. The results of the 1991 convention overwhelmingly declared Chiluba president of the MMD and presidential candidate against Kenneth Kaunda of the United National Independence Party, UNIP. But with Chiluba defeating Kaunda in the reintroduced multi-party polls, he appointed Richard Sakala to the highly prized job of Special Assistant to the President for Press and Public Relations. But whatever the reason for Chiluba choosing Sakala, this is said to have angered Mmembe, who is believed to have vowed to fight Chiluba and the MMD to the bitter end. If you were old enough when the MMD wrestled power from Kaunda's UNIP and throughout the 10-year reign of Chiluba, you will recall that Mmembe's post never ever saw anything good in Chiluba's administration. But some political and media analysts say that after the October 1991 presidential and general elections, most shareholders and founders lost interest in the paper, as Kenneth Kaunda, who they wanted out of office, had been removed. There are indications to the effect that Mmembe, as a result of this, used his accounts and administrative role and the privilege of attending shareholders' meetings to his advantage. With Arthur Wina passing on, Mmembe is said to have quickly assumed the shares previously owned by his uncle. Sometime towards the end of Levi Mwanawasa's tenure, Mmembe's post, through Amos Malopenga, were tasked to do Mwanawasa's autobiography. It is common knowledge that Mmembe's post kept their involvement with the autobiography as quiet and as low as possible. I doubt if they would have kept as quiet as they did if I, any other media organization, journalist, or any other institutional person had been given that task. What is very clear is that they would have published stories with front page screaming headlines labeling any other organization or person as a beneficiary of what up until that stage they had termed Levi's corruption. But that is Mmembe's post for you, and the rest I leave up to you. One supposed ally of Mmembe's post is Simon Kabanda, Citizens Forum Executive Director. He was a weekly columnist and, as a matter of fact, wrote very critical articles on Levi Mwanawasa and his government, very much in line with the policy of Mmembe's post. In curtailing Kabanda, Mmembe's post told him that because they were real the paper, his column would be put on hold for a while. That was about the last time Kabanda's critical articles on Mwanawasa ever saw the light of day in Mmembe's post. Just in case you did not know, Simon Kabanda is a former Catholic priest, and I first knew him as father in 1996. At the time, he must have been rector or priest in charge at Buchi Parish in Kitwe. But by 1998, he had failed to live required of a Catholic priest, one of which is to do with the vows of celibacy. This is a man who in his mind thinks Zambia is at war and is now calling for international peacekeepers to come to the country. It is clear he is another troublemaker. His colleague, Frank Bwalia, the Change Life Zambia Executive Director, is another troublemaker. This is a Catholic priest on so-called sabbatical leave, whose main purpose is to organize civil disobedience and destabilize Rupiah's administration. On February 6, 2011, he featured on Mobi TV's Open Forum, and he boastfully said that he is in good standing with the church. Now one might ask, is sharing the same platform with politicians like the Cobra what is considered to be in good standing with the church? It is statements like these that in more ways than one appear to link the Catholic Church in Zambia to Bwalia's Change or Die slogan. It is about time that the Catholic Church, through the Zambia Episcopal Conference and the Catholic bishops, categorically comes out on anti-government rantings of one of their own priests. For the way Bwalia is coming out, it is clear he is a serious politician. The bottom line remains that he is an ordained Catholic priest, using his position to attack and criticize government and agitating for civil disobedience. He must be stopped. According to what is found at the Patents and Companies Registration Authority, PACRA, principal activities are to motivate orphans, widows and other citizens for empowerment. It is very clear that what this Catholic priest is doing is very far from what is registered as the principal objective. Instead of pursuing the path he has taken, I think it would be wise for Bwalia to help his church deal with the many problems within the rank and file of the Catholic clergy, including celibacy, which is being flouted like no one's business. One of my colleagues has lamented that Mmembe's post should organize a public discussion on celibacy, whose main speakers should be the likes of Bishop Paul Duffy, Frank Bwalia, Simon Kabanda, and Nathaniel Mubukwano of Mongo, and moderated by Fred Mmembe. This may be the greatest show on earth. I now want to fill you in on a few issues regarding Walia's, Members, Kabanda's and Luwinda's preferred presidential candidate, the Cobra. When the Cobra's contemporaries were in the heat of things, strategizing to liberate Northern Rhodesia from British colonial rule, he was a not-so-good constable in the federal police. He spent time in a federal prison for stealing a bicycle, but even when he was released from prison, there is no mention of the Cobra's involvement in the liberation struggle of Zambia. With the attainment of independence in 1964, the Cobra is said to have been very uncomfortable with the Kenneth Kaunda-led UNIP government, as he believed he would be harmed for informing against the liberation freedom fighters. So with the help of a European man, he is said to have fled to Britain around 1966, where up to this day he claims he was a train or locomotive driver for British Rail. What I have stumbled upon in my snooping around is that the Cobra may have been telling lies all this time. There is information to the effect that the Cobra was actually a porter, so perhaps it would be good for the Cobra to show us his certificate of service showing his tenure at British Rail as a train or locomotive driver. The circumstances under which he came back to Zambia also give sad reading, but his coming back to Zambia in the early 70s was facilitated by a finance minister in Kaunda's regime. Through this same minister, the Cobra was linked or connected to the Avondale Housing Scheme, a project under the Zambia State Insurance Corporation, through a project consulting firm run by a prominent man of European descent. You may wish to know that for the high-profile job of project manager, the Cobra did not possess qualifications. The Cobra has always referred to the Avondale Housing Project as his. The Cobra has been lying through his teeth all these years. Now imagine him as head of state. How many lies is he going to tell? His Patriotic Front is said to be in a pact with the United Party for National Development, UPND. But it is visibly clear who is carrying the other on the back. A very humiliating and devastating situation for the one being taken to the Under 5 clinic. I am sure, even as the Cobra goes to bed each night, there are quite a number of bad deeds that recollect somewhere in his mind, like the incident on the British Airways flight in 1993. There is the 2001 Chawamania massacre and slaughter of people, where the Cobra was in full control giving orders. The Cobra is also believed to have masterminded the attack on Mubanga Chileshe and the humiliating abduction of Sam Zulu in 2009, yet he still traverses the country freely. Now, this is the person that some of you, my brothers and sisters, want to be president. A man who has no regard for other people and even international borders. One other thing is that the Cobra has been throwing all sorts of stones at Rupia simply because the head of state was born in Southern Rhodesia. Yes, the Cobra has a problem with this. But Rupia, being the humble person he is, has never ever hidden his birthplace and is proud of it. As for the Cobra, a man who has no known former classmates and playmates, has some explaining to do regarding his actual birthplace. There is information that he was actually born in Tanganyika, present-day Tanzania. His father, a cook, is said to have migrated with a few of his little children, who included the Cobra, leaving behind their biological mother. The place we have all been made to believe as the Cobra's birthplace in Mpika, Northern Province, called Chitulika, is actually Giduliga, or something like that in some Swahili dialect. This may sound funny, but Bembas, among whom his father settled, had difficulty in pronouncing Giduliga. It appeared simple for them to just say Chitulika. Well, that's it for this edition of Stand Up For Zambia. But be sure to join me again next time. I'm Chanda Chimba III. I'll see you soon, and catch me if you can. to the alleged land scam in Zambia's capital is to unveil a similar scam at the Kafue District Council and challenge the Minister of Local Government and Housing to act in the same manner he did over the LCC. Now the question is, why were Lifuka and Lungu holding on to information so important to the cause they claim to be pursuing until the minister suspended the Lusaka City Council? Is it because their ally Lubinda is caught up in this scam? I'm sure you remember how not too long ago they demanded for Dora Silia to resign her portfolio as Transport and Communications Minister. Now here's to you, presenting Fred Mmembe, the almighty editor of the cheeky and otherwise anti-government Post newspaper. This is an ambitious, cunning person, believed to have been born out of wedlock. It is clear the almighty Mmembe has an idea involving councillors who include people like Patriotic Front, Kabwata Member of Parliament Given Lubinda. Lubinda is resisting several calls for him to step down as chapter president of the African Parliamentarians Network Against Corruption, APNAC, on what are being referred to as moral grounds. So far, Lubinda has shown thick skin, yet he is on record calling for people being investigated for corruption and other vices to step aside or resign on what he always refers to as moral grounds. Well, it is his turn now, and he must practice what he preaches. The allegations over land at the LCC border on corruption, the same vice his APNAC stands to fight against, yet he is finding it very difficult to step aside. But for his allies like Ruben Lifuka's and Goodwill Lungu's Transparency International Zambia, they react her inner strength, but also to pave way for investigations leveled against her by Kalale over the single sourcing of KPMG engaged to do some auditing. Shortly after his dismissal, Kalale rushed to hold a press conference, making several specific allegations. This immediately prompted a work stoppage by some workers at the electoral body. The whole problem sounds more administrative than anything, but if there is really something to investigate regarding the counter-accusations of corruption and wrongdoing, the relevant arms of government will no doubt get to the bottom of it. This also brings me to the issue of the goings-on at the Lusaka City Council, LCC, the country's flagship local authority. May the Minister of Local Government and Housing really get to the very bottom of the land scam. In the third here, welcome to Stand Up For Zambia. In this edition, I'll talk a little bit about the Electoral Commission of Zambia ECZ saga, but I shall also fill you in on some issues regarding Fred Mmembe, King Cobra Sata, as well as a few other people and organizations who are forever critical of governments. It can only be imagined that Mmembe resigned not only to show
our employees have got their rights, which we as employers have no authority to abrogate, and we respect them. So we cannot discuss them in public because they too, they know the procedures on internal administration.
Justice Florence Mmembe, this pretty, cool, calm and collected soft-spoken lady, resigned her position as Electoral Commission of Zambia ECZ chairperson following a protracted standoff with some workers at the electoral body after she dismissed Dan Kalale as director. Justice Mmembe's appointment, it must be mentioned, was overwhelmingly ratified by Parliament, whose numerical figures weighed more on the ruling Movement for Multi-Party Democracy MMD. Hello, Chanda Chimba.